Hello from the internet to the internet. It's the 2 Point Deduction Podcast right here on MMAmania.com, and it's me, Matt Ryan, here with you again for the third straight week. I've not been canceled yet. I've not been canceled. That ding means that I have to apologize to our corporate overlords about something, but we'll figure out what that is a little later on in the show. We've got Clement, our cameraman, back, who, if you listen to last week's show, I said we didn't have a camera. You saw a logo designed by our good friend EA out of Brooklyn. And we were told that Clement, after episode 1, told me to go fuck myself and that he was going to go train for the Olympics and climb K2. He ended up in Hoisington, Kansas. That's right, Hoisington. I didn't even know that was a real place. The only way I knew about it is because he showed me a West Wing episode. It's long story. Big fight week, fans, and we're going to start off not with mixed martial arts, but with the world of boxing. This Saturday night for the WBC World Heavyweight title, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury are going to face off once again. And this story coming from our friends at MMAmania.com, the people who pay me to put on this lovely podcast every single week. And we're so thankful that I get to speak to you and I get paid to do this. This is fucking banana pants. Fury and Wilder at the start of this week got into a little bit of a dust-up at a press conference, having a little pushing and the shoving and the ripping and the tearing. And it's a lot of the same carny parlor tricks that we've seen not only in MMA and pro wrestling, but in the first Fury-Wilder fight. And if you don't remember the first Fury-Wilder fight, you missed out on some amazing pro boxing. And in the first fight, Tyson Fury dominated in the early rounds, but Deontay Wilder found his moment. Just one of Deontay Wilder's punches can end a fight, and he's done it against every single opponent he's faced, except Tyson Fury. He did not put Tyson Fury away. He was close in the 11th round. Wilder drops Fury with a punch that can only be described as the immaculate reception of punches. And Fury, his lights get turned out. But the referee, instead of what happens in mixed martial arts, he's done, he's out, he's fucking on Dream Street. Referee just does the 10 count. In boxing, we've seen a lot of judges go to that MMA style of if he's down and he looks like he's incapacitated, he's not doing the 10 count, he's calling the fight. But at 8.5 or 9, Tyson Fury rises like Lazarus, rises like The Undertaker to finish the fight and get a controversial draw for both him and Deontay Wilder. Over the course of 2019, Deontay Wilder fought Dominic Breazeale, the mandatory challenger for the WBC title, and then he fought Luis Ortiz in a rematch of their crazy 2018 fight inside Barclays Center. And Wilder, same verse as the last, drubbed Breazeale and knocked out Ortiz for a second time in a fight that looked much like that first Fury-Wilder fight where Ortiz almost got him. Was almost being able to win on the scorecards, but Deontay Wilder with that fist from hell was able to stop Luis Ortiz. And got me excited for this. I am excited for this fight. I'm not going to be able to watch the fight, but I am excited that heavyweight boxing is in a position again to where we could talk about it and people know who these world champions are. Now, you may not know who Luis Ortiz is or you may not know who Dominic Breazeale was, but Deontay Wilder was fighting top-quality opponents, former Olympic champions or Olympic competitors in Breazeale, and Luis Ortiz, the most feared man in heavyweight boxing that didn't hold the world title. That was Luis Ortiz. Tyson Fury fought Otto Wallin and another journeyman fighter based out of Germany. The fight against Otto Wallin back last fall almost gave Tyson Fury his first loss. Almost derailed any opportunity of a Fury-Wilder rematch because of a gigantic gash over the eye of Tyson Fury. It was like 3 separate cuts over his eyebrow, and if you look up the photos, it looks like a piece of rare filet mignon just spread out over his eyebrow. And Tyson Fury fought on, and he won by decision. But one of the things I was thinking heading into the second fight, are people going to care? Because, or even if the fight was going to happen, because Tyson Fury signed a big deal with ESPN. Deontay Wilder's a part of Premier Boxing Champions, which has a contract with Fox and Showtime, two of Dana White's favorite program outlets, obviously. Shout out to Steven Espinoza, who's now in charge of Bellator, which has a card this weekend in Thackerville, Oklahoma. Because when I think of high-quality fighting, I think of Thackerville. I'm kidding. But we go back to heavyweight boxing, and when my generation was growing up, we had Evander Holyfield, we had Mike Tyson, we had Lennox Lewis. We had the last great generation of heavyweight boxers. And now with Wilder and Fury and Anthony Joshua and then the Andy Ruiz story, last year I was inside Madison Square Garden covering the Andy Ruiz fight. And I was there just because I wanted to cover a world heavyweight title fight inside Madison Square Garden. It was supposed to be Jarrell Miller fighting Anthony Joshua. And somehow, some way, Jarrell Miller fails for 3 separate substances less than a month out from the fight. Less than a month away, Jarrell Miller fails for his shot in his hometown to become the unified world heavyweight champion. And then Andy Ruiz, who the weekend after that announcement won a fight in fairly easy fashion, negotiates his way into that world title fight and shocks the world. And not only beats, knocks out Anthony Joshua in Madison Square Garden in what was supposed to be his coronation as the defining heavyweight of the 21st century. The man that beat Klitschko, the man that was going to unify all the world title belts, do something that hadn't been done in over 2 decades, got dropped in the middle of Madison Square Garden by a pudgy kid from Imperial, California. And while I wish the Andy Ruiz ride would be a little longer than it was, Andy Ruiz went the Riddick Bowe route. He went the route of, oh, I'm the world champion. I'm the best in the world. I don't need to do the work anymore. Gained a godly amount of weight. Walked in, I believe, 45 pounds heavier than he did for the Joshua fight. And went up against an opponent, and Anthony Joshua, for the first time in a long time in his career, had a motivation, had something to gain, didn't have something to lose because he lost. But he had something to gain, and you look at the UFC heavyweight division, and that's Daniel Cormier right now after losing to Stipe Miocic back in the summer. He has nothing left to lose. If he loses this fight, he just goes home. He just goes back to Gilroy High School and coaches, goes back to Octagon side. That's what Anthony Joshua was walking into in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, if I lose again, I lose. And that's it. I go home. I take the tens of millions of dollars I've made as a professional boxer, and I go home. But Andy Ruiz, he thought the party was going to keep going, and he got dropped. And I feel a little bit of that for Tyson Fury, too, heading into this Saturday, to be quite honest with you. I think he's taken his 2 Palooka opponents very lightly. And whether or not you want to question Wilder picking Dominic Breazeale for a world title fight, he was one of the top opponents. It wasn't a Dillian White, who's another top-rated heavyweight in the UK, but he also had his own run-ins with UK anti-doping that luckily, gladly got fixed. But you look at Tyson Fury walking into this fight and doing the shoving, the cursing, all of the blah-blah that you expect from Tyson Fury, but is it hollow? Is it from a guy who's still worried about his eye and getting that busted wide open again by someone with the hardest hands and the biggest punches in boxing? He's got a new trainer in Sugar Hill Stewart, who's the best. Why don't we have more trainer names like that in MMA, by the way? And we'll get into some weird fucking training stuff in just a minute if you watched UFC Rio Rancho. But Tyson Fury changes his trainer again, goes to the Kronk gym and tries to learn the Kronk method of knockouts because he's looking to knock out Deontay Wilder. Wilder doing what he's been doing since he went into boxing. And I think that's why Deontay Wilder's going to knock Tyson Fury out on Saturday. I think Deontay Wilder retains his WBC World Heavyweight title and knocks out Tyson Fury. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm saying it right here now on the podcast for all in the world to see that it's going to be Deontay Wilder retaining that title and then going up possibly against Anthony Joshua if Joshua gets through all of the bullshit and the politics of boxing when it comes to his unified world heavyweight titles. And now let's go to the news. All right, it's time for the news. These stories brought to you by MMAmania.com and UFC Rio Rancho. Holy, what the fuck was that show? The judging of this card, the judging wasn't as bad as the week prior, but when you look at 2 fights being stopped for illegal grounded knees, which is what happened in the co-main event between Diego Sanchez and Michel Pereira, we'll go into that in a second, but Jan Blachowicz, and I'm part Polish, and I'm botching this name, and I apologize. He walked away with the win over Corey Anderson in the main event, impressively setting himself up for a shot next at John Jones. And he told MMA Fighting that it's his turn. Thiago Santos had his chance. Dominic had his chance. They had their chance, but they didn't use it. It was a really close fight, talking about Jones' fight against Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes made it a really good challenge, but Jones was better, a little bit better. And last week I made my feelings very much known that John Jones is champion in name only, essentially, when it comes to the UFC light heavyweight division. And it's insane to me that this fight is going to happen. Dominic Reyes is going to get passed by, and it's going to be Jan getting that next shot. And Brendan Schaub, former UFC heavyweight and currently professional sports yeller, just like ya boy, feels that that's not a money fight. That there's no desire for a fight between those two. This is what he said on his podcast, Below the Belt. And this is transcribed by bjpenn.com. I have nothing that does absolutely nothing for me. John, give us what we want and go to heavyweight. And I've got to agree with Brendan Schaub. I may not think he's the best comedian in the world. That's obviously Bill Burr or Harry Turjanian or Dan A. White. Dan A. White's got a good tight 15. It's not good enough for the Tonight Show. Maybe Def Comedy Jam or the Redneck Comedy Tour. Not Jeff Dunham, though. He stopped profiling puppets. But Jones has not been himself lately in fighting. He was in the crowd because the card was in New Mexico, just like 15 minutes from his house in Albuquerque. And he was trying to do the, you're next, kind of the pro wrestling of it all. And MMA is pro wrestling, and pro wrestling is MMA. But that's a discussion for another time. And it felt very half-hearted and very who gives a shit. And it's not a slight against Jan. He's a great fighter and a deserving challenger to a world title. But there is no sizzle there. There's no feud. There's no Dominic Reyes coming in undefeated and saying, I'm going to beat the best in the world. There's no Daniel Cormier of it all. This former Strikeforce heavyweight badass, this Olympic-level wrestler, one of the best fighters in the world, coming down in weight because of his friend Cain Velasquez and not wanting to fight Cain Velasquez, and ending up in the biggest blood feud in MMA at that time since Liddell Ortiz. Does anybody really give a shit about Jan and John Jones fighting on International Fight Week or fighting later this year? Does anybody care about the UFC light heavyweight division? It's a point I belabored last week on this podcast. Does anybody care about the fighters that fight at 205 pounds that aren't John Jones? People care about 185. People care about 265. But they don't care about 205. And I think we're going to see that more and more as the diminishing returns on John Jones at light heavyweight continue. And we'll move on from that because it's going to turn into a 45-minute seminar on how I would book the UFC heavyweight division. But this is not that kind of podcast, and I hate backseat bookers because I deal with them every day, and they make me go insane, and they make me say, Matt, you need to take your pills, but I don't want to. I'm sorry. Let's go to Diego Sanchez. Diego Sanchez is fucking crazy, and he has been training with Joshua Fabia, and if you watched UFC Rio Rancho and you watched his fight against Michel Pereira, Diego Sanchez, when he walked into the octagon, was strutting around, preening like a rooster. Basically walking around like a rooster trying to take his territory inside the octagon. And then in the first 30 to 40, the opening salvo of the fight did a rolling thunder and would do these weird strike combinations and is now training in the school of self-awareness and only has one man in his corner. Doesn't have a full team, doesn't have someone carrying the water, carrying his shoes. He doesn't have an entourage. He's got one trainer, and that's Fabia. And in his last fight before this fight this past weekend, again, when he tried to fight Michael Chiesa, he said he was going to try to choke the man to death. Diego Sanchez at 38 may have gone round the bend. Per a report from MMA Junkie, Fabia was burning incense and shoving peppermint extract into the nasal cavity of Sanchez back in the Chiesa fight, and then warned the athletic commission that Chiesa might die from a super secret death choke taught to him by South American guerrillas. This man has a license to train people and corner in MMA fights at the biggest MMA company in the world, and he sounds like the guy who told the lead singer of the Beach Boys, told Brian Wilson to play in sandboxes. This is a high-level carny grift. And it gets weirder because Fabia was asked to demonstrate the move, which was described to MMA Junkie as a technique that started as a standing guillotine and then saw Sanchez rotate his shoulders so that his head was braced above his shoulders, something akin to a stone-cold stunner. It was a variation of a fucking cravat and a neck breaker. And I just, it's the James Vandy thing. It's trying to self-improve and new age your way into becoming a contender again. And Diego, after that fight, like, I loved it for entertainment value, but as a guy who's 38, has seen better days in his career, and is fighting top contenders in co-main events in your home state, the only reason you won that fight is because you took that illegal knee when you were grounded. To basically explain, if you didn't watch the card, Sanchez was back against the octagon, was seated, and Pereira swung a knee into the head of Sanchez, giving him a cut right above the eyebrow, like we were talking about with Tyson Fury earlier. And the cut was above the eyebrow, and it was dripping down into his eye. It wasn't a gusher. It wasn't this massive well of blood. But it's an illegal move, and the referee gave Sanchez the option, which is not technically what you're supposed to do. The fight was supposed to be stopped. It's an immediate disqualification. But the official gave Sanchez the opportunity to say, you can fight, or you can say, we're done here, and you'll win by disqualification. Sanchez was losing on the scorecards. He was not winning this fight. He was not doing what he needed to do to win the fight. So Sanchez, whether or not he was cognizant of that, or he literally believed that the blood above his eye, due to the illegal knee, was so effective that it basically caused the fight that he couldn't fight anymore. The fight was stopped, and Pereira got the loss, and Sanchez went back into the win column. And that's going to be a conspiracy theory for a very long time about whether or not Sanchez stopped the fight to take the disqualification win because he knew he was going to lose that fight. And I hope that's not the case, and I believe a lot of others in the MMA community, in the sports yelling, or just fans, really don't want that from Diego Sanchez, who's someone we've seen grown up from the Ultimate Fighter till now to one of the legends, one of the cornerstone fighters, a UFC Hall of Famer, win a fight that way. The second fight that happened on that card, you really don't want that to be what we remember about Diego Sanchez. At least that's not what I want. When you look at the legacies of MMA, and this is going to be something we talk about a lot on this show, is the legacy of these fighters, because the legendary fighters of MMA, for the most part, are still alive. We're in maybe the 4th generation of mixed martial artists, and, the Ken Shamrock's still alive. Ken Shamrock's wrestling weekly on Impact. Dan Severn, still around. Hoist Gracie, still around. Chemo, I think, still around, just, going town to town like the littlest hobo carrying a cross from city to city, but he's still around. And then you look at Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz, they're still around, and Tito was fighting back in December. I was there. These guys are still here, and we're watching the first real generation of MMA stars age and the effects it takes on them, and as we've come to see in football and boxing and other major sports, especially, sports like football and boxing, where there's a lot of collisions, where there's a lot of injuries. And for Diego Sanchez, I don't want that to be a participatory factor in the declining of his quality of life. He walked away from his camp, he walked away from his training team to go on this new age expedition. And is this really what a fighter or anybody at 38 should be doing? Having someone shove peppermint extract up your nose before a fight? It makes no sense to me. And to each their own when it comes to training, but at what point do you think someone in the UFC's got to say, dude, you got to cut this shit out? It doesn't make you look good. It doesn't make us look good. It's doing you a disservice. It's doing your legacy a disservice. And for the ha-has and the giggles and for the tweeting, yeah, it's fun. It's fucking great. Like, I enjoyed watching that fight because it was calamity. It was chaos. It was the old school Western slam, bang 'em up kind of MMA I fell in love with. But then you read about this shit and you look at the whole board. You just don't look at the aggregate of this past Saturday night. You gotta wonder at what point, what the fuck are you doing? It's the same thing I said when Chuck Liddell at 48 decided to fight Tito Ortiz after not fighting for a decade. What the fuck are you doing? And there's going to be a lot more stories and a lot more people in MMA that make you say that make me say that. And I want to know your opinions on this. I want to know what you think of this Diego Sanchez situation. I want to know who you think's going to win Wilder versus Fury. Tweet us at MMA Mania. Follow us on Instagram at MMAmania.com and leave a comment right here on YouTube. Slam that like button, ring that bell, and leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. We're going to be reading some of these comments throughout the show or in the next few weeks. So if you got a good comment, let us know. And if you got a good tweet, let us know. But right now, I'm going to move over to the left, and I'm going to bring in, not the Harlem Shuffle, but my best friend, Stephanie Sottile, and we're going to play a game called Science versus Probability. It's Science versus Probability time right here on the 2 Point Deduction Podcast. I am here in front of a variety of shelves, as you've seen throughout this episode, along with Stephanie Sottile.
Yes, hello.
How are you?
Good. I have little tiny Morty on my shoulder.
Yes, you do. Tiny Morty and Joe Rocha watching over your shoulder.
I know.
And Bobby Bonilla.
They're both equally nervous.
Yes.
He's nervous. Look at this guy. He's not dead, right?
Bobby Bonilla? No, he's not. He's very much not dead.
Oh, awesome.
He is in the 2 Point Deduction Hall of Fame for the biggest contract grift in history. He is being paid over $1.7 million a year from the year 2001 to 2023.
All right, cool. Teachers still get close to minimum wage. Got it.
Well,
Awesome.
it is time to put teaching to the test.
Yes.
It's science versus probability time right here on the 2-point deduction. And Steph, last week I walked in 2-1 off of our first episode.
Okay.
And let's go through our picks from last weekend at Rio Rancho.
Let's see, because I have no idea.
Jan Blachowicz defeated Corey Anderson. Both of us got that right.
Oh, okay. So we are 3-2.
3-2.
Okay.
Diego Sanchez defeated Michelle Piera via an illegal knee disqualification.
Uh-huh.
I picked Pereira. You picked Sanchez.
Uh-huh.
So it is currently 3-3.
Okay. So say I won that. Make
You
it
won
very
that one.
clear.
And we are
I am representing the people that don't watch the sport, even though they love a podcast about the sport.
Yes.
So to all 5 of you, you have to remind them. You have not full viewers, just the ones that don't watch the sport. Maybe they like me. I don't know. That doesn't. People don't like me in real life. It's fine.
You know.
You
mean
so
well.
You have to remind them of what the nicknames were, because that is what I use in my science experiments.
Well, it was the Prince versus Overtime.
Yes.
It was the Nightmare versus the Devastator.
The nightmare.
And it was a word for a female ninja against a woman with no nickname.
Yes.
In our final fight, and we both picked the woman with no nickname, Montana De La Rosa.
Right.
So right now we are tied 4-4.
Yay! See?
But right now we're gonna.
What did I say last time? The whole chapter doesn't tell the story, so science is still in this.
You certainly are. You certainly are. But let's go through.
Unlike conservative views on climate change, science is still in this.
Let's head on down to New Zealand for this Saturday night's card in Auckland. And, folks, we are recording this before the weigh-ins that are taking place at 7 p.m. local time in New York. We're, a real city.
It's like you're threatening them.
They know what they did.
Better watch it at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? I'm not going to watch them. What's going to happen if I don't watch them?
Well, you're going to have to watch them.
I'll just have to look up what their weights are online.
Yes. Well, just in case when we release this podcast and people are wondering, after the fact, if someone was like, hey, Matt Stark talked about the fight on the fucking podcast and it was there. Fuck you. Let's go to our first fight.
I didn't get any of that either, and I'm right next to him.
It's Paul Felder, the Irish Dragon, going up against Dan the Hangman Hooker in the main event of UFC Auckland from Auckland, New Zealand.
Oh, that's rough. So it's the Irish Dragon.
Yes.
See,
I'll try to help you.
Yes.
Paul Felder kind of looks like Bill Burr.
That doesn't help me, but I appreciate the visual, because I think anybody picturing Bill Burr yelling while he's in an MMA fight is super enjoyable. And
early 2000s Bill Burr too, like Chappelle's Show with a beard Bill Burr.
No, I like him at his peak neuroticism, which I don't know. What would you say? 2007, 2008?
Well, that's what I'm talking. Like
I
that.
think so.
Yeah, this is him at that point.
Yes. So he is the Irish Dragon.
Yes.
That makes me like him. Doesn't necessarily mean he might win, because you said he's an Irish Dragon.
Yes.
I mean, St. Patrick's Day is coming up. I feel like he's gonna really celebrate his heritage, even though he's a dragon. But it's St. Patrick's Day, so the liquor's flowing. So I feel like this dragon is gonna get drunk. Is what I'm saying. This dragon.
For those playing along, St. Patrick's Day is in 3 weeks.
Okay. I said it's coming. I said it's coming up. I said it's coming up, and he's a dragon. Mm-hmm. He needs a lot of liquor to get to the same state that a human is on St. Patrick's Day. So maybe he starts drinking early. He's a dragon. They gotta pump that shit in, because he's a giant dragon. So I'm gonna have to go with his opponent,
the Hangman.
The Hangman.
So the Hooker is fighting in his home country. He's fighting in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. This fight has been a long time coming. And let's take a look at the probability after all of that sciencing you've just done.
If I had my phone, I'd look at it.
Felder had a 2-fight winning streak with wins over James Vick and Edson Barbosa, who's actually a mutual opponent for both Hooker and for Felder. And Felder took a loss to Barbosa and James Vick in 2 of his last fights. Last fight for Hooker was against Ally Aquinta at UFC 243. And you know what? Paul Felder's still riding that winning streak. I think Felder is riding the momentum into this fight, and I'm going to pick Paul Felder. And you can stop playing with your hair now.
Oh, are you done?
Yes.
Okay, yay!
You know, I am the host of this podcast.
Yes.
So,
oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's why. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Next up is Jimmy the Brute Crute going up against Michael Oldroysic, whose nickname is the Lord.
Oh, what's the other one?
The Brute.
The Brute. Oh my goodness. So he's the Lord.
Yes.
So that really depends if you think the Lord exists.
Mm.
Is he a I'm assuming he's a religious
like a
man?
lord in like the English sense.
Oh, that exists.
Not the Lord and Savior.
And the other one is the Brute.
Yes.
See, I think about, especially in those, the older countries, England, France, I think about all the revolutions.
Yeah.
The poor and the underprivileged, like fighting against the bourgeoisie. And I feel like that's what's going to happen. I think the Brute is going to tap in to those old feelings from many eons ago, many fortnights ago. So I'm going to go with the Brute. I feel like he's going to overtake the Lord, throw him off his crown, keep the jester, because those are always fun and needed.
Well, for the Lord, he went 3-1-1 in his last 5 fights, including a win over Khalil Roundtree that was turned into a no contest because he failed a piss test. But Crute's 10-1 in his career. He lost his last fight via a Peruvian necktie submission at UFC Vancouver to Misha Krukenov. And
is there no Peruvian shirt?
No, just the necktie.
Okay.
And he had a 10-fight winning streak, which included 3 stoppages in the UFC. So a 10-1 Crute trying to bounce back from a win. I think he's in a better position. I'm going to be taking Jimmy Crute.
So the Brute.
The Brute, yes.
See.
And finally, it is Carolina, the Polish Princess Kowalkiewicz, taking on Yan Jiwan, whose nickname, we got a 2 for here.
There's 2 nicknames.
Fury or 9.
9?
9.
I'm assuming not like the German 9, like no.
No, like the number. Like the Mambo number.
Number 9. It's the Fury versus
the Polish princess.
The princess. I mean, I don't know if you've seen many princesses that are super strong.
Are we counting Adventure Time?
I was literally thinking that. I was thinking of Susan Strong, but she's not a princess. No? Let's go over princesses that we know. Princess Peach, super weak. If you use her to drive in Mario Kart, you're going to fly right off the track. She's super light.
I can attest to that.
Hot Dog Princess from Adventure Time. It's a food. She can't do anything. Same thing with Princess Bubblegum. She's smart, not necessarily strong. So all of those princesses, I mean, Mia Thermopolis, I mean, I guess strong of will, but we're talking about muscle here.
Hold, you made a Princess Diaries
She
reference?
was a princess. She was from Genovia. I don't know where that is in relation to New Zealand, but I'm still going to go on the very controversial topic that princesses are physically weak. They don't need to. They're strong up here. So I'm going to go with Fury.
Well, Kowalkiewicz lost her last 3 fights to Jessica Andrade, Michelle Waterson, and Alexa Grasso. She's 3-5 in her last 8 fights, while Jian is on a 4-fight winning streak, including her last win, her biggest win, over Angela Hill. So I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go with the woman with 2 nicknames. And
9 and Fury.
Yes, exactly. And Steph, how can people find you on social media?
Sure. If you look on Twitter and Instagram under the name God's Unwanted Daughter.
That's right. God's Unwanted Daughter and, well, everybody's unwanted host. Steph, thank you for joining me for 3 weeks in a row.
Yes, of course. We're going to keep this going.
And
we don't know why, but it's coming back.
And I apologize to our guest, Mookie Blaylock. We did not have time for you this week, sadly, but hopefully we will have you on at some point to talk about 10 by Pearl Jam. But until next time, for Stephanie Sottile, for Morty, for our cameraman who came back from K2. He was actually just in Kansas. It's a weird story.
I'm so sorry.
I'll tell you about it later. To everybody in the Plain States and everybody watching UFC New Zealand, I'm Matt Ryan. So long from the internet.